Nebraska. Coleman Hawkins from Illinois has committed to play at Kansas State. Apparently a really nice NIL deal. And Jerome Tang and K-State have put together one huge front line. Will they have enough guards? I'm sure they'll figure that out. But Coleman Hawkins, a tremendous player, talent from Illinois, has committed to play for Jerome Tang this upcoming school year.
Yeah, good for them. I know last year was a bit of a disappointment as far as the follow-up campaign goes because year one was just so electric, but they've made no bones about the fact that they are very much remaining in the hunt, and I think this is a move that shows you that they are heavily committed to that basketball program thriving and have a $2 million deal, which I don't know. We start getting into the money with some of these things, and I either don't really care most of the time or I question kind of the numbers. But I believe this. I mean, I've heard of other guys going for $2 million, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but big investment for Coleman Hawkins. I guess it depends on what corner of the internet you want to look at to see how good of a player he is. I've seen a mixed reaction. Some feel he's not worth the money when you're talking $2 million. Some feel that he's, maybe going to be even better with a change of scenery in Manhattan. I'll let the experts decide on that, but it appears to be a really nice addition for Jerome Tang, one of the top transfers out there, and obviously they feel like there's a good dollar amount worth investing in this guy. So good for Kansas State. Seems like they're fired up about this addition.
I sent a text to Jerome Tang and I said, "Hey, congratulations with the bulgy eyes." He said, "God is good." That's kind of how he responds to most of the text messages. So K-State gets themselves a big out of Illinois. Also, yesterday we had the story, and Amanda Kristovich will join us at 3:30 to talk from her perspective in the business world about sports business. AAC commissioner, remember, Mike Oresko's no longer the commissioner. AAC commissioner saying that he's trying to solve how to help coaches keep talent on campus. Also attract new talent to a different experience. Could you find a brand that is willing to support student athletes, every sport, every school within a conference, provide an opportunity to generate new revenue and resources that can go directly to student athletes? This is the kind of stuff we need to be thinking about in reference to the AAC, the American Conference, also possibly having somebody for their naming rights.
I mean, I gave it more thought and chewed on it a bit more yesterday, and I was leaving yesterday feeling like the naming rights thing was an absolute green light. If you're the Big 12, I still think it feels a little weird, and I think it's okay that it feels a little weird. You don't just blindly go like, yeah, sure, let's sign that off too for more money. But given the view of the whole landscape, I don't know that the SEC or the Big Ten will go out and do the exact same thing. So if they don't and you close the gap by a couple $1 million, then I think that that's a good move. And you can't not do things because the other people you're trying to catch might do them too. I think that's a stupid reason to not do something. So if you can add – and you don't need to do everything in reaction to other people either. So Brett Yormark's got to worry about the Big 12. If $2 million extra to – have the naming rights changed is worthwhile for everybody involved, then I think go with it. I mean, what are we talking about? It's the name of a conference as well. I do think that you don't want to make it too much of a clown show and, have just some weird name, although, it tends to be reported that, it's the All-State 12. I think that's simple enough and not so in your face as far as the marketing of it goes, that All-State Big 12 or Big 12 presented by All-State or whatever. That's fine with me. I think for $2 million a year, that's a smart move and not really giving away too much, honestly, because what are we talking about in the long run? It's not changing the name of the SEC or the Big Ten. I think that would probably rattle a few more cages, and I think they'll find a way around where they are more of a Big Ten presented by Geico or whatever.
Right.
So I think if the Big 12 can kind of stay in that lane, yeah, it seems like a smart move and the type of move that Brett Yormark was hired to make, and one of the only types of things that you can really do at this point to generate income that's not already there. And I know the other one is private equity, as we'll talk about, I'm sure. But, the more I chewed on the naming rights thing, as long as they don't goof the name up too much and it's All-State 12 or something like that, I'm all for it. I think it's a smart deal.
You think they should change the number
I actually don't now. I've changed my mind since yesterday.
All right, why?
Because we don't know how many are going to be in the league 2 years from now. We don't know how many will be in the league 4 years from now. So if you change it now, then you add, I don't know, maybe some schools from the ACC, maybe some, other options are out there eventually as well. Or, I know there's always the Pac-2 clinging onto the life raft of hoping to get an invite, and I don't necessarily believe that's right around the corner. I said that a year ago, and here we are, and I still don't feel like that's necessarily right on the door, even though I took some heat for that, but here we are. I do think the ACC thing is very real. I think there's just too much unknown, basically, is why you don't change the name now, because
I never even put that into consideration.
That's really what it boils down to for me, and you're known – you fought all this time to have the Big 12 survive, basically, right? So I think you want to kind of maintain that, and if you're going to become the third conference, potentially, or you're going to be one of the Power Four, then don't you want it to be the Big 12 as it was known, and not basically a brand new conference, because that's pretty much what you would be creating if you then change the name. So that's where I fall on it, mostly because it's going to fluctuate too much to make it a permanent thing.
Well, no, that's a great reason. I was wondering about the 12 because now it's 14. No, excuse me, it's 16, and who knows what it'll be a little bit later on. Somebody mentioned Southwest Airlines as a sponsor, but then again, you have West Virginia, Cincinnati. They fly all over the country now, which is something they've done for quite some time. But I kind of like that one. But there's a lot of different names, whether it's Allstate or whoever
Buc-ee's,
else.
I know has been mentioned as like just a fun, everybody having fun with what all could be named what and what makes sense regionally. And I know, Buc-ee's is broadening its horizons across the country. But yeah, Southwest, I think that would be a nice partner, especially because even if you have, other schools that are maybe not in that hub per se, there's still a lot of schools that are. I mean, I still think the conference offices are going to be in DFW, so there's Southwest for you right there. So I think that would make a lot of sense. There's tons of them, though. There's tons when you start looking through all the schools and who they're associated with that seem like they would be good naming rights partners that wouldn't be too just out there, like gobbledygook.com. Like that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where you have some of those startups and internet companies, and I think it can kind of just get weird. But Southwest or Allstate, whatever, I think that's okay enough.
One of the things that you got to be careful even with the possibility of national bank names, because they've changed. Different companies get bought out and they change, and we've seen that in the cellular business as far as technology. So. All right, so there we are with
I'm all in
AAC.
on the name thing. If it's Allstate, Big 12, or Allstate, I think you got to keep Big 12. Like Allstate, Big 12, I think that's fine. I think that's $2 million. Where else you get an extra $2 million for doing nothing really, other than just changing some logos and changing some banners and things. So yeah, I've definitely settled in on that since yesterday. The private equity thing, I'm in and out on that because I still need to learn more about that. But
I'm working on.
I'm glad that your mark is out there kicking the tires, and I think that some of the pushback you see yesterday, I don't take that as like, man, these are all the smartest people in the world. This guy clearly doesn't know what he's doing. I kind of take that as a good sign that he is ruffling some feathers, and that there are some people going, wait a second, you're not supposed to nab another couple $1 million and. And I'm not under any illusion that they're ever going to be on par as like a number 3 in the race for the top conferences, because I think the gap is just so huge due to TV dollars. But I do think that if you can incrementally add $2 million here, $4 million there, $3 million, all of a sudden the athletic departments are making $7 to $10 million more. No, that's not going to have you at the top of the list of highest earners, but it's going to have you squarely number 3 at some point.
And growing.
And so, I'm all for that. And that's without including the private equity possibilities.
I did reach out to somebody who is in the private equity business. I have not heard back from them. I sent a text. And then I tried to call on the way to the studio, and it went straight to voicemail. I don't even know where he might be. But I did reach out to 2 or 3 different people who are a part of the investment involved in private equity. Kim Coulter brought this up to me. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Kim, of course, has been very vocal about private equity, and that a lot of us maybe just don't understand if you're not a part of any kind of a major business or how business works. But he did bring this up as well. If, in fact, you have some of these schools that are going to have to start paying an extra $20 or $22 million, what is that, cap or whatever, when it comes to revenue sharing with athletes, and you can't do that. You have to. You don't have a choice if that all works out and it all goes to the next level. So let's put it this way. Kim goes, so what sports are you going to cut? What sports do you cut if you're Texas Tech or you're Oklahoma State or you're Baylor or any of them if you cannot afford to move into the next level of what college football finances and revenue might be about?
Well, here's the thing. First of all, to get straight, you don't have to pay the full cap.
No, you don't.
I mean, you're going to have to pay players, but just because the cap is, let's say, $20 million, that doesn't mean that Texas Tech, even though I'm sure they would, but, that doesn't mean that every other school out there has to pay $20 million. I'm sure there will be some that pay like 12 and feel like that's a better investment for their roster or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, to his point, where does all this extra money come from? Well, I think some of it comes from you're not basically burning it and setting it on fire with all of the goofy stuff that we used to, gawk over, like the example always used is the colored waterfalls and facilities and things like that. Like, I think you aren't necessarily spending on those, or you're cutting back on those or those types of areas. But that's still not enough to necessarily turn into $10 to $20 million that you'll need on your roster. So, yeah, I mean, outside of donors and your normal chains of financing, then, yeah, you have to look elsewhere, and it does make some sense. I think the problem's not so much paying the bill early on. It's when the bill comes due later on. And I'm still quite curious as to how you magically are making so much more money down the pipeline. Is it because now the conference is giving you another $2 million for its name, and then you have other business deals that come together, and that's how you're ultimately going to pay back this stuff with interest? Like, that's the thing to me, is like, when the check comes due, are you guaranteed that all the moves you made are putting you on a path to where you're all going to have the money to pay that back? You know what I mean?
You're talking about the private equity part now. I've read up a bunch about it. I've read a bunch of responses from people about it, and even people in investments. And you're right. Is it a short-term fix, so to speak, and what's going to happen when it's due? And a lot of people making these decisions will be retired.
Well, I hear the fact basketball is underrated, and it's like, but you're not guaranteed to get that much more money out of basketball. That's what you hope for if you're Brett Yormark. That's something that you want to have happen, but that's not guaranteed. So if things like that don't necessarily occur, I know they plan for that, but I just, the idea of that money looming out there and with interest and things like that, I'm not an expert on it, but that just makes me a little bit leery of, like, yeah, and initially it seems like it wouldn't be a problem, but 5-10 years down the line, if you're not having success, what does that look like?
Well, that's why you have a lot of other people who help make those decisions, not just the school presidents, a lot of others who are analysts, et cetera, consultants. We're now joined by